Speak up, I can't hear you.
Yeah, is that Tony Gambino?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, listen, let me just introduce you, Tony. My name's Greg Szymanski from the Investigative Journal. Eric Phelps is with us, and I'm sure you know Eric, but our listeners would want to know a little bit about you. You're the grandson of Lucky Luciano, and Lucky Luciano would bring the mafia into the modern age, putting the group into what is called organized crime. Out of the ruins of the Masseria and the Maranzano gangs would emerge the five families in New York. One of the most powerful would become known as the Gambino family. Tony, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about, let's start out with John F. Kennedy.
Can you speak up a little bit? I can't hear you.
Yeah. Let's start out with the John F. Kennedy assassination and what you know about it. And Eric, feel free to ask some questions.
Tony tell us about, where he was born, how he was brought up, and his relationship to his grandfather first.
Go ahead, Tony.
I was born in Palermo, Sicily in 1943. My mother, I don't know who she was, because she was married to another gentleman, but my grandfather ordered one of his daughters to have an affair with Carlos Thomas Gambino to bring him into the crime family and let him run the five crime families in New York.
Right.
And at the age of 5, I became a made man by being branded by my grandfather's diamond ring in my left arm, in the middle of my arm, above my elbow. And right below the muscle.
Right.
And I strictly worked underneath him and until I went to jail. And then he passed away.
Now, when did you come to the States?
What were the guns that you carried, Tony, and who did they belong to?
Huh?
What were the guns that you carried?
When I was 13 years old, he gave me 2 Pre-38 German Lugers. And he told me I'd never leave the house without them, and they're my uniform.
And what was one of them?
And one would belong to the General Rommel of the German Army, the Desert Fox, which was a very collector's piece, and it was worth a lot of money.
Wow.
And it had Rommel's name engraved on it, and it was all done with... it was nickel plated, and it had silver and gold on it.
Now tell us, Tony, when did you come to the States?
That's Bill.
Huh? There. When did you come to the States?
I didn't hear you.
Are you on a speakerphone?
No, I'm on a house phone, and I'm having a hard time trying to understand you. It's down real low or something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll talk loud until they turn it up in the studio, then let me know. When did you finally come to the States?
When did I finally what?
Come to the United States.
Oh, I came to the United States in 1949 for the first time.
Tell us how you grew up on the streets and how your life progressed, and then we'll get into some of the specifics about Kennedy and also Marilyn Monroe and others, things you know about. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hang on. Could you hang on 1 second?
Okay. Eric, feel free to talk. He's having a hard time hearing me, and he's up all the way. We have him potted up all the way, so feel free to...
all right, go ahead. I'm on.
Okay. Tell us how you grew up on the streets, and then we'll get into some specifics about cases you know about. Go ahead.
You want me to tell you about my grandfather?
Yeah, and how, just basically tell us how you grew up and what you understood about the mafia as you grew up in it. Go ahead.
Well, he made, at the age of 19, get rid of who? Who will go ahead? I only got $10 on me.
You're talking to Tony Gambino. Go ahead, Tony.
At the age of
I wanted you to type all this down as you were saying it.
At the age of 15 years old, I became a member of my grandfather's family, and he made me head of all the godfathers.
Right.
And I was a what they call meeting organizer. Mm-hmm. And when a head of a family had a disagreement with the other family member of a different family, say like if Carlos Thomas Gambino had problems with Dominic DeLuca or Joey Genovese, I had to turn around and bring them to a meeting. Mm-hmm. And I had to get them to either agree, or if they didn't agree, then other steps had to be taken, and somebody had to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Eric, do you have any questions? Go ahead.
Yes. Tell us more about Lucky Luciano and his influence in Hollywood, Tony.
Oh. Well, what he did was, if you've seen Godfather 1 and you've seen that prize horse's head being cut off and put in that producer's bed.
Right.
Well, stuff like that went on with a lot of the movie stars that he had taken under his wing, and he gave half them people in Hollywood, and he had to give them an offer they couldn't refuse. And that in the first Godfather, when the horse's head was put in that producer's bed, that was for Frank Sinatra to get his first leading part in motion pictures. Now, he took Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Clint Eastwood, Burt Reynolds, Esther Williams, Marilyn Monroe, Rita Hayworth, Humphrey Bogart, and a lot of others. And Tony Bennett, and Perry Como, and even Johnny Weissmuller.
Wow.
Tarzan, huh?
And he made them all movie stars, and he was getting a percentage off of them a month.
So Lucky was getting a percentage off all these stars that he put into Hollywood.
After he helped them to become stars, because Frank Sinatra was only a barroom singer. Mm-hmm. That's all he was. in Bohoken, New Jersey, he started off singing in bars. And then he took them out of the bars, he put them with the big bands. And then from the big bands, he went to my grandfather, and he said that he would like to become a movie star, and he would like to get him. He couldn't act for nothing. And they actually had to teach him how to act. After he got the leading part in that one motion picture that he had, and the horse's head got cut off for that.
So that was basically a true story that actually happened about Sinatra, correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. That's how Frank Sinatra got started. Mm-hmm. And he had to make other deals similar for Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, Clint Eastwood, Burt Reynolds. You know, he gave them people we call an offer they couldn't refuse.
Well, tell me, Tony, with Lucky Luciano with this kind of power in Hollywood, and why didn't the FBI come after him?
So was Kennedy involved with the movie theaters in Hollywood. Yeah. Mr. Kennedy himself.
Uh-huh. So did the Mafia have a relationship with J. Edgar Hoover?
Yes, they did. J. Edgar Hoover, he was being paid off by the syndicate along with members of the FBI and the CIA. Just like whether people want to believe it or not, in 9/11, President Bush and the CIA and the FBI, they're the ones that knocked down the Empire State. The Twin Towers.
Tell us what you know about that, Tony.
Huh?
Tell us what you know about the connections in 9/11. Go ahead.
Well, all the gold that was left in the United States, my grandfather's construction company built the Twin Towers.
Right.
Okay? And then they went back and did some underground work under the Twin Towers where the gold in the United States and in other countries was put under the Twin Towers in a concrete abutment.
Right.
At one time, you used to be able to go underneath the subway and get out of the subway and come up underneath the Twin Towers.
Mm-hmm.
But that was eliminated. And all the gold that was left in this country was placed under the Twin Towers. And then the only way you can get that gold out from underneath there was to take the Twin Towers down. And if you look at the gold coin commercial, after President Bush got his hands on that gold, this is what Rosemary O'Donnell was trying to bring into the light, and they took her off the television. See? Because this is what she knew about the gold underneath the Twin Towers. And if you look at that television commercial, you'll see where it says gold coins made from the gold that was found underneath the Twin Towers. And that's the only reason why the Twin Towers were taken down, so he could get his hands on that gold. And as soon as he got his hands on that gold, he goes into Iraq. Ben Laden had nothing to do. In 1935, an Army airplane bomber hit the Empire State Building, which was a heavier and bigger plane, and it didn't knock the Empire State Building down. All high-rise buildings are made to be struck by airplanes.
So you have inside information that these guys, Bush included, tell us more how they knew about 9/11 prior to it happening and also organized it.
Yeah, let's put it to you this way.
Yeah.
If you were a terrorist pilot, okay, and you made it to Washington, D.C., and you were supposed to hit the White House, why would you fly a plane into the Pentagon if you were supposed to hit the White House?
Right.
Okay? Then up in Somerset, they said that plane turned around and it was supposed to, that's the one that was supposed to hit the White House.
Right.
If you look at the records of that plane was scattered in a 100-mile radius. If a plane is going to crash, it's going to stay at the crash site. It's not going to be blown up and spread out in a 100-mile radius. Mm-hmm. That plane was shot down by a fighter jet's missile. Mm-hmm. They shot that plane down.
Right. What do you know about the connections between our government, the mob, the Vatican, all of their complicity in 9/11? Do you think they all work together to bring this about?
You better believe they do. And the Vatican is the headquarters. The Vatican is the headquarters for that.
And how do you know that?
Do the Mafia Dons all know that?
Huh?
Do the Mafia Dons all know that?
Yes, they do. It was the Pope who got my grandfather to hang Mussolini upside down in the square and had people rock him. And if a person didn't throw the rock, my grandfather had his men there to order them to shoot anybody who he handed a rock to that didn't throw the rock.
Now, I think anybody who doesn't think the Vatican is involved with the mob and also with our government intelligence agencies ought to listen again to what Tony said.
Well, the Vatican wasn't corrupt. You think they would let these priests rape these boys and get away with it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell me, does the Archbishop of Palermo control the mafia families there?
Yes, they do.
So therefore, the Vatican's in control of the heroin drug trade.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's talk a little bit, Eric. You have done so much research on the Kennedy assassination. Why don't you ask Tony some questions that come to mind about his knowledge of how that really happened?
Okay. Were you in Dallas that day, Tony, when that happened?
I was in Dallas that day.
Mm-hmm. And where do you feel the final fatal headshot came from?
The headshot that killed Kennedy came from a hitman who was placed in the storm drain.
I read that Johnny Roselli was that hitman. Does that ring a bell to you?
That is correct.
The same guy who did the shooting and the same...
If you would look the films of that over, you'll see that all his bodyguards stayed away from that car because they knew it was going down. Once the first shot was fired, what are they supposed to do? They were supposed to make a body wall to protect the president. Not one person went near that coach. And the guy had the chance to kill him sewer. And if you would have watched that film, you'll see the guy come out of the storm drain, walk across a green field over there, and got in a car. The guy drove him away.
Outside of Roselli, who else was involved in that hit team? And what were you doing in Dallas then?
Huh?
Who else was involved in that hit team, to the best of your knowledge?
Who was involved?
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra was involved.
You mean Frank Sturgis?
Huh?
Frank Sturgis, you mean?
That's right. And Frank Sinatra was involved, too, because he's the one that caused that. Because he introduced Marilyn Monroe to the two Kennedy brothers, John and Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And Marilyn Monroe got pregnant by the Kennedys. And she was going to call Jacqueline Kennedy and Robert Kennedy's wife to let them know that she had an affair with their husbands, and neither one of them two got her pregnant. And the Kennedys are the ones who killed Marilyn Monroe. And Frank Sinatra introduced Marilyn Monroe to Jack Kennedy at the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And then he found, and then he turned around.
Sorry.
Are you there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. And then after that happened, my grandfather, you remember when Frank Sinatra's son got kidnapped?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
My grandfather had him kidnapped, and he gave the sands to Frank Sinatra in Vegas because at one time he was the biggest star in Vegas. But then after this happened, Wayne Newton came into the picture, and Wayne Newton became a bigger star in Vegas than Frank Sinatra. And he took the sands back off of Frank Sinatra and made Frank Sinatra pay all that ransom money for his son because of the death of Marilyn Monroe. Because he was still making a lot of money by Frank Sinatra being a movie star and singing and records.
Do you know who they hired to kill Marilyn Monroe? Was that something you were privy to?
They gave Marilyn Monroe them drugs.
Mm-hmm.
They did it themselves. Just like Edward Kennedy.
Okay.
Just like Edward Kennedy. He took that girl up on Cape Cod, right, and up in the Hyannis. And for some ungodly reason, he put a .22 round through that girl's head. And that's what killed that girl, was the bullet that he put in that girl's head.
So Ed Kennedy shot her. I've heard that before from the coroner, yeah. That's interesting.
Right. And that's where the blood came on her dress and stuff. That came from the head. After that .22 round went through her back of her neck and into her brain. That's what killed her. And then Edward Kennedy stepped out of that car. He jacked up the gas pedal, and he kicked that gear and car with a stick. And let that car go over the cliff with that girl in it. He never went over that cliff, and he never jumped out of it, and he never rolled out of that car.
Tony, stay on the line. We're going to take a 3-minute break, then we'll be back with Tony Gambino and also Eric John Phelps on the Investigative Journal. Back in 3 minutes. Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal. My guests are Tony Gambino of the infamous Gambino crime family in New York, and also Eric John Phelps, author of Vatican Assassins. And we're discussing how the Vatican, how our government, the international intelligence agencies, and the mafia all work together in various activities in our country, how they've had a foothold in Hollywood, how actually Jack Kennedy was killed, and also how Marilyn Monroe met her demise. Tony, when you grow up in the crime family, do you feel you are basically protected by our CIA, protected by top Vatican officials, and also, in a sense, working for them? What goes through your mind when you're doing things on the street? Is that something that you understand as you grow up in the crime family?
Yes, you explain all this, you know, and it all goes under your code, your honor, respect, and yes, and everything around it is we were well protected because of the Vatican, the FBI, the CIA, and the United States government. You know what I mean? The United States government was making money because my grandfather was making money. Al Capone was making $100 million a week. Chicago alone.
Yeah.
See?
Unbelievable.
And Carlos Thomas Gambino, right? He was making like $55 million a week. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
Joey Genovese was making $100 million a week.
Mm-hmm.
And when Vegas opened up, Joey Genovese down there, along with my grandfather, and then of course, what's his name? I got a bipolar disorder and a post-traumatic stress from Vietnam, and sometimes I get off track. You know what I mean? But
yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll help you along here, and I'm sure. You know, I wanted to say this, and then I'm sure Eric has a couple questions before we get into it.
Bugsy Siegel, and
okay.
He was part of Vegas, and they used his money. They used his money and my grandfather's brains.
Yeah, so they used the Jews' money and the brains of the Sicilians. Right?
That's why the Twin Towers was so powerful, because they were backed by the syndicate too, and there was nothing but Jews working in the Twin Towers, because they controlled the money in the United States. Every Jewish business, when they make their money, they send all their money out of the United States back to their own country. And that's why Hitler went against the Jews, because he needed money for power in Germany, and they were taking the money out of Germany and sending it back to Israel.
Well, of course, there was no Israel at the time, but I guess my question to you, Tony, is...
And there is a Jewish mafia that works along with the Sicilian mafia.
Pardon?
Yeah, if you want to be a full-blooded Sicilian like me, you are part Greek, part Italian, and part Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And they went back in the days of Caesar of the Roman Empire. They used to take the Greeks off of the island of Sicily, which were the Sicilians, and put them in the arenas and made them gladiators to kill one another. We were the world's first slaves. But
tell us about Jimmy Hoffa, Tony.
Jimmy Hoffa. Okay. Jimmy Hoffa was a beautiful union organizer for the truckers when he first started out. And then there was a young snot-nosed punk who was on crack cocaine by the name of John Gotti. Well, he turns John Gotti into a truck hijacker. That's all John Gotti did was smoke crack and hijack trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one day, a truck was coming up from Florida, and it had a $5.5 million load on it, and it was coming to Nicky Scarfo in Atlantic City.
What was on the truck?
Huh?
What was on the truck?
What was on the truck?
Yes.
Nicky Scarfo started to through Giuseppe and Giovanni Gambino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. They started supplying the Eastern Seaboard with cocaine and heroin. And my grandfather didn't want this crap because he said when it first came into effect, coke was always on the scene. So was heroin. But all that stuff was hidden because it was a rich man's high. Your district attorneys used it. Your judges used it. Politicians used it. It was a rich man's high. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that's where it started at. And the government got involved because the government will not stop the drug wars, and they will not stop drug coming into the United States. What they do is they get these cheap-ass drug dealers, and they pop them once in a while on the streets. But the big dealers and the people who supply them, they keep on letting that stuff come in because they're making money off of it, too.
So it was a truckload of cocaine or heroin that John Gotti hijacked then?
Okay. And John Gotti hijacked this truck. And and through a mistake of Jimmy Hoffa, this truck got hijacked. All right? And Jimmy Hoffa was supposed to make John Gotti make that load good, but he never did. And he had X amount of days, X amount of time to do this. Right? Even if he had to go and order some stuff and bring another truckload up to replace what was stolen. Okay? So what happened was Jimmy Hoffa, he didn't, anytime somebody owes money, they're supposed to give a courtesy call. Say like if you say you're going to, you owe $2 million. And you're going to say you're going to pay that on the 15th or the 30th of the month. Okay? Now, if you're going to pay that on the 30th of this month, the 15th day you should have called or courtesy call and say, yo, I got X amount of dollars that I can give you. All right? Mm-hmm. But I will not be able to give you the rest on the 30th. I need more time. That would be accepted. But if you waste somebody's time to come down over from Sicily or over from another state and have to go and see you to collect this money off of you, and you don't give no courtesy calls and you ain't got it, then they eliminate you. And Jimmy Hoffa owed a lot of money. And he kept on picking around. He gave a date. He went over that date, and he never came up with it. Jimmy Hoffa was placed in body bags in a limousine at the truck stop on 295 going towards Delaware on New Jersey. That was the last truck stop in New Jersey before you go over the Delaware Memorial Bridge.
Uh-huh.
On 295. There's a campground and everything down there.
And where did his body end up?
His body wound up alive in the highest embankment, the concrete embankment of the George Washington Bridge. And a guy who was pouring concrete up there had to jig it because it was a 3 slump. It was real nice and stiff. and this limousine went up over the bridge. The guy popped the lid to the trunk in the inside the glove box. They got the live bag of garbage. They stuck them in the abutment, and then he jigged concrete, 3-slump concrete down on top of the garbage. All right? And the guy who was pouring the concrete, he got an envelope of $150,000.
So he's never said a word about it, huh?
No. No. See, they said the stadium was being built at the time, and they said either the stadium or the George Washington Bridge, but they didn't know. But that's where he's at. He's at the bottom of the highest abutment in the middle of the George Washington Bridge.
What happens to people, Tony, for example, when you talked about the Kennedy assassination, when you talked about Bush knowing about 9/11, when people want to really start talking that know about it, what usually happens to them? I mean, about Hoffa, I'm sure people knew about it. Has anybody you know been eliminated that may have got to the truth about any of these murders that we're talking about?
There was a few people that brought this out in the open, and they were paid to shut up, and some were assassinated by the Kennedys themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when John Kennedy Smith, he raped that girl in West Palm Beach, Florida, and he got away with it at their estate. Every bottle, see, the Kennedy's father, my grandfather, always had a vendetta against the Kennedys because they was in the same business, bootlegging. Mm-hmm. The Kennedy family, for every bottle of scotch that comes in from Scotland into this country still today, the Kennedys get $1 off of each bottle.
They have income.
See? And that's how the Kennedy made their money, bootlegging.
Right. Now, you spent some time away, and now you're back again. Is there any particular reason you're talking now? Are you worried about it, about coming forward with a lot of this stuff?
No, I ain't worried about it because the United States government ought to be put down. You know what I mean? Because they're more crooked than the mafia. It's all nothing but one hand washing the other, and it's starting with the Pentagon, and it's working along with the, the United States gave Ben Laden money, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay? Am I right or wrong?
Right.
All right. The United States gave Germany money.
Right.
To Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
The United States knew that the Japanese were going to bomb Pearl Harbor.
Right.
The Japanese ambassador was sitting right in the White House when it happened. Everybody saying, "Oh, we ordered new planes." The planes were coming in to bomb Pearl Harbor. They said, "Oh, there are new American planes coming in." The United States allowed the Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor.
That's right.
So they can get in the war. And then Roosevelt in 1933, he bankrupts the United States because he gets involved with Germany. Germany didn't do anything to us. The United States government puts their noses in wars and in countries that they ain't got no business doing. I went to Vietnam. I put 4 years in Vietnam. I wasn't allowed to shoot in the rubber trees where these gooks were shooting at me. Richie Capizzi got loose with an M60 machine gun because he couldn't take it no more. And the tracers put some trees on fire, and he knocked some trees down. The United States government gave this man a life sentence because he couldn't pay for the rubber that he downed. And all the rubber that them trees would make for 20 years.
Huh. Are you there?
Yeah. Are you there, Tony?
Tony there. Tony, are you there? I think he got cut off. But anyway, Eric, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, well, let's continue on till we get Tony back on. I think somehow he must have hit the phone. Tony, are you there? Well, anyway, we'll get to, if we don't, hopefully we'll get him back on. Eric, an incredible story, though, isn't it? That a guy like Tony Gambino, one of the inside, he's a made man, one of the top guys in the mafia. Tony, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you're back. We were just commenting, you were cut off there for a moment. I wanted to mention, today as we speak, the mob is still as strong as ever, working together with the CIA, working together with the Vatican?
Up in Sicily, yes.
Okay.
But not in the United States.
Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, most of the mafia in the United States now is nothing but big business.
Okay.
Okay.
The corporate
it's casinos, hotels, different types of companies that they invested in, just like Governor Ridge, when he was governor of Pennsylvania. He was getting all this federal funded money to build prisons in Pennsylvania. But I like to know one thing: how did Governor Ridge turn around and put the Department of Corrections of Pennsylvania on the Wall Street on the stock market using federal funded money?
Right. So basically, the mafia's turned into big business now.
That's correct in the United States.
And the old system that you worked with is basically not functioning the same way on the streets, correct?
No, because you take like these two punks that we had in Philadelphia, John Stafford and Joey Skinny Marino. Joey Skinny Marino started having shootouts in the afternoon in South Philadelphia. John Stafford, he tried to kill Joey Skinny Marino on the Benjamin Franklin Bridge. He had some guys go over there, Johnny Rosario, and he tried to have Johnny Rosario shoot at Joey Skinny Marino. As he was going over to Jersey, they were coming over to Philadelphia, and they're shooting on top of cars and everything at 12 o'clock in the afternoon trying to kill this guy on the Waldman Bridge. Well, that's the same bullshit that Gotti was starting on the streets. Kill the son of a bitch. He was trying to bring back the old days, but it didn't work. Just like Little Anthony and Doug of the Junior Black Mafia in Philadelphia, down at 56 and Woodland Avenue, and Malcolm's Barbershop. They were in there one day, and I happened to stop by, and they say, "Hey, Tony, John Gotti's on the phone." I said, "I don't talk to that maggot. I don't have nothing to do with John Gotti. He shot a 90-year-old man and made himself a made man by killing Paul Castellano."
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Carlos Thomas Gambino, he had 250 bookies on the street. For each one of them bookies, my grandfather used to get $150,000 from the top every month from all his bookies. Then they start getting $100,000. Then he start getting $75,000. Then he start getting $50,000. Hey, so what's the problem? Well, how come the money's getting lower and lower and lower? He's saying, my bookies are running out of customers. It's in the bathroom, mommy. Excuse me. So anyway, we turn around, and what I was talking about was he started having he started skimming from the top. And then I had to go to him from Sicily, not as a father and son relationship, because we never had a father and son relationship. I never knew who my mother was and he had a relationship with. Before me, my grandfather ordered a boy. My mother had 2 girls. He forced her into having 2 abortions before he had me, because he wanted a boy to put the bond to having Carlos Thomas Gambino come into the crime family. That's the purpose why I was born, by order of my mother, who was married to another gentleman, to have a relationship with Carlos Thomas Gambino, to have a boy that my grandfather wanted to raise underneath him.
Okay. You know,
and
I wanted to ask
today, I don't know who my mother is, and I'm 64 years old.
Wow.
And nobody never told me who my mother was. Just like my wife. I was married to Mary Rosati. All right? Now, Dominic Rosati, my grandfather went to him and said, I want your daughter to marry my grandson. Well, he didn't like that, because he was a syndicate man, and he wasn't. He was an Italian, but he wasn't involved with the syndicate. So my grandfather gave him an offer he couldn't refuse, and had that girl marry me through force. Okay? Now, I had 3 children with her. Now, in 1978, my father-in-law, he knew that I went and got the cars inspected. He knew I put the cars in the garages if they needed work. I took my wife's car to the garages. Well, I went one day to take the car to the garage, and my wife happened to be with her sister. And she had my 3 kids with her. She seen her car in Joe's garage lot, and she stopped and had my sister-in-law drop her off, and she went and talked to Joe. She says, is my car done? He said, yeah. Well, Joe says, but you know Tony. He brings the guys around, they check the car, they make sure there's no car bombs, they make sure there's nothing wrong with the car. I had guys go around the car with mirrors and open up the hood, open up the seats, look under the seats, look under the motor, anywhere possible that a bomb could be planted. Because I knew this guy didn't like me. Mm-hmm. And she put my 3 kids in the car. She went and sat in the car. She waved her sister off. She said, I'm going to take the car home. And she told Joe to give me a call. Right? Mm-hmm. As Joe was calling me on the phone, I answered it, and the car blew up with my 3 kids and her in it.
Oh, my God.
And that was the first time I was married, and that were the only 3 kids I had with being married. And then I had 2 other girls in other different relationships, but I never got married.
Eric, we have about a minute or two, a couple of minutes. Do you have any final questions for Tony?
No, I just want him to confirm to the listeners that the mafia is essentially Roman Catholic and Sicilian at the top, right, Tony?
That's correct.
And that they are subordinate to the papacy.
That's right.
And therefore, ultimately, the source of all this drugs and crime and drug running of the mafia, the ultimate beneficiary is the Pope. Would you not say that?
That's correct. Yeah. The Pope is more powerful than the President.
Yeah, and what did you know about Cardinal Spellman? Anything? We got about a minute. Remember when he was around?
Well, you might as well say he was the godfather for the Catholic Church.
Yeah, they called him the American Pope.
Huh?
They called him the American Pope.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He was the godfather for the church.
Yeah. With heavy connections to organized crime, correct?
Yeah, and backed by the CIA and the FBI.
And the Justice Department, right?
And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. And go into perdition. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
Because Jesuit actions are centered on blind obedience to their superiors, they are told that they will never be held accountable for anything they do, not even by God. They are absolved of all personal responsibility as they become mere puppets for those that are higher up in the hierarchy. A professor told a student who was studying under him to become a Catholic priest, "You will never have to give an account to God for actions you do by the order of your legitimate superiors. If they were to deceive you, being themselves deceived, they alone would be responsible for the error you have committed. Your sin would be imputed to you as long as you follow the golden rule that is a base for all Christian philosophy and perfection, humility and obedience." See how deceitful this is. The superiors are basically saying, you'll never have to give an account of your actions to God, don't worry about it. This allows them to perpetrate any act in the belief that they are beyond judgment. If their superior tells them to carry out a murder, they think that if they obey, then God will not hold them accountable and will instead blame the superior. This is one method the hierarchy uses to overcome or bypass the conscience of an individual. When you combine this with the spiritual exercises that have taught them to suppress human emotion and imbued them with demons, you can see how they would become capable of some extreme acts of violence, and anything else for that matter. A second vital principle for Jesuits can be summed up in the phrase, "The end justifies the means." Remember this one, it's very important. Before this maxim, the ideas of absolute right and wrong completely vanish. Conceivably, there is no crime or atrocity that is not allowed as long as it is for the greater glory of God. In fact, the sins that achieve the right result become holy in the eyes of the Jesuit, no matter how disgusting. You can lie, cheat, steal, rape or murder, but if the ends are the right ones in their eyes, then the means are justified. This exact concept also exists in Islam, where lying, deception, murder and other atrocities become acceptable if it furthers the cause of Allah on the earth. A third twisted principle of the Jesuits is probabilism. If a Jesuit has in mind to do something but knows it is very probably illegal, if he can find the merest hint that it may not be, he is allowed to continue with his action. For example, if he consults 100 teachers or doctors about his intended action and 99 say that it would be unlawful, but then one tells him that it may not be, he can act on that 1% probability that it is in fact lawful. In fact, if the Jesuit can imagine any reason in his own mind why his action may not be unlawful, however unlikely, this frees him to do it. It's a form of self-deception, lying to yourself to try to keep the conscience clear. Fourthly, there is the idea of directing the intention. This is the idea that if the person meditates on something holy while they perpetrate something evil, the soul contracts no guilt or stain. Therefore the Jesuit can kill someone or lie or cheat or steal, but as long as he is focusing on something holy at the time in his mind, their soul remains white as snow. Again, such is the depth of deceit within the Jesuit system that they deceive even themselves. Fifthly and finally, there is the doctrine of equivocation or mental reservation. This policy allows the Jesuits to follow a secret policy while stating something completely different to the outside world. This is directly from the mysteries where secret doctrines and purposes were hidden under double meanings and secret symbols that seem quite innocent to the uninitiated. A Jesuit quoted, "It is permitted to use ambiguous terms, leading people to understand them in a different sense from that in which we understand them. A man may swear that he never did something, though he actually did, meaning within himself that he did not do so on such a day, or before he was born, or under any circumstances, while the words he employs may have no such sense as would discover his meaning." He goes on to say, "It is the intention that determines the quality of the action, and one may avoid falsehood if, after saying or denying something aloud, then add something under his breath that, if true, would make his statement the truth." So take this example. A Jesuit murders a man on a Thursday, and the police take him in for questioning and ask him if he murdered the man in question. The Jesuit replies, "I did not murder him," which is obviously a lie because he did, but then under his breath or mentally he adds the words, "on Friday." These inaudible words that he whispered to himself after the initial lie have now made the statement true. By doing this, Jesuits can permit perjury and in their own eyes remain blameless.
You and I have very little in common, but we have one thing. We have some Jesuit training in our background.
Oh, I don't know. But I would say that the Jesuit training, I believe, gives you a sort of clarity of mind, a reasoning power, which you don't realize it while you're being taught as a young boy, but that's what they're doing to you.
In 1973, Jesuit tactics were used in a film that was nothing more than the promotion of the Jesuit order, The Exorcist. The most feared deity of ancient Babylon, Pazuzu, was a demon that was possessing this young girl in this film. Based upon the true account of a Jesuit priest, the film makes God look weak and powerless, but the Catholic Church strong and majestic. Where an actual Jesuit priest, William O'Malley, stars in the film. The writer and producer of The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty, was educated by the Jesuits in Georgetown. Modern cinema is modeled upon Alfred Hitchcock, but its style can be traced back to the magic lantern of the 1400s, where a 17th century German Jesuit priest, Athanasius Kircher, revolutionized its invention to an occultic art form to lure people away from the Bible back into the fear of Jesuitized Catholicism. He is also the father of broadcasting with his megaphone. So why do few people know about the Jesuits and what impact do they have on the world today? Jesuitism is an impenetrable mystery to 99 out of 100 of the Jesuits themselves. Russian mystic Madame Blavatsky had access to their own writings and quotes from them. The order has secret signs and passwords according to the degrees to which the members belong, and as they wear no particular dress, it is very difficult to recognize them unless they reveal themselves as members of the order. There is also a secret class known only to the general and a few faithful Jesuits which perhaps more than any other contributed to the dreaded and mysterious power of the order, says Niccolini. The Jesuits operate in a world that few people can see, and that is why they are so successful at what they do. In 1773, when the Jesuits were abolished under its head Lorenzo Ricci, Adam Weishaupt, a Jesuit professor of canon law, continued something that the Jesuits had achieved for almost 2 centuries: infiltration. On this Catholic church in East London, you can see a pentagram. But in Freemasons' Hall in Covent Garden in London, the headquarters of the United Grand Lodge of Masons in England, you can also find the pentagram. Freemasonry is seen as the most secret of the secret societies. But what is Catholic Jesuitized symbols such as the IHS doing in Masonic lodges? Jesuits you can see in this picture with the skull and bones. Later Freemasons also have the skull and bones. The double-headed eagle of the Holy Roman Empire can also be seen among the higher degrees of Freemasonry. And the famous evil eye of ancient Babylon and Egypt can also be found on the apron of Masons. In a book approved by the Jesuits, it says, in 1902, the Masonic historian J.G. Findle wrote that the Jesuits had succeeded in all parts of the globe in creating strife and confusion among Freemasons by tampering with the rituals and by the introduction of higher degrees. When European scientists attempted to recreate the so-called Big Bang Theory in 2008, it was highlighted in the film Angels and Demons. But what is generally overlooked is, who actually created the Big Bang Theory? The Big Bang Theory was first described but not so much named by the French Jesuit Georges Lemaitre in the late 1920s. His picture of the universe expanding from a single point was certainly controversial, but has now become scientific orthodoxy. The scientific community that actually praises itself on its secularization believes in the Big Bang Theory, scientific speculation that has still never been proven, which shows that Jesuit scientific philosophy dominates the direction of modern science, where the top Jesuit science astronomers are Darwinists, who try to merge the secular and the sacred, which is called theistic evolution, for Jesuitism is founded not on the Bible, but upon the teachings of Aristotle, where the Jesuits' ratio studiorum still impacts secular education today. It should not be overlooked that the advantages as well as the disadvantages of our humanist classical education are for the most part attributable to that pedagogic activity which at one time was spread by the Society of Jesus all over the world. The Jesuit president of Boston College, William LaHaye, caused controversy when he welcomed warmonger Condoleezza Rice to Boston College, but this is not the first. The Dutch Protestant prince, William the Silent, was killed by the Jesuit assassin Balthazar Gerard. The French Catholic monarch Henry III, as well as his cousin and successor, Protestant King Henry IV, were both killed by Jesuit assassins, as well as Italian economist Pellegrino Rossi. Why this fascination with murder? Blavatsky tells us why. The Jesuits reckoned among the greatest achievements of the order that Loyola supported by a special memorial to the Pope a petition for the reorganization of the abominable and abhorrent instrument of wholesale butchery, the infamous tribunal of the Inquisition. The Jesuits took over the Inquisition from the Dominicans, and while many people think it is long gone, the London Guardian of 2006 tells us that the Inquisition formally ended only 40 years ago. In that same year, a Dominican, Joseph Augustin de Noy, said that the Inquisition was justified. That it means all these horrific instruments that bring the most excruciating pain, as well as torture, secret courts, military tribunals, and no trial by jury are just. When Benedict XVI visited Brazil, he praised the history of Catholicism, but he was blasted by the late Venezuelan president Hugo Chavez for the horrors of the Latin American Holocaust that was imposed upon them. But the Catholic Church, to justify its horrors, made the film Apocalypto, which shows the natives of Latin America as complete savages who were saved by the Catholic Church. But there is one country, despite its own colonial horrors, that has put up the strongest resistance to the Papal Inquisition, and the British Supreme Court has a monument of King John and the Magna Carta as a memorial to this. What is the Magna Carta? The best authority on this is the Protestant historian J.A. Wiley. The great principle conceded so early as the days of King John in Magna Carta, after it's confirmed in the reign of Charles II in the famous Act of Habeas Corpus, and held by all statesmen who have flourished since to be one of the main foundations of British liberty, namely the inviolability of the subject saved by the authority of law. There are other monuments in places like Runnymede, in the south of England near the River Thames, where the Magna Carta was actually signed as a memorial to this resistance. There are also memorials in places like Bury St. Edmunds in the east of Anglia that records the famous Magna Carta and the hundreds of knights and the 25 names of the barons that stood up to the Pope and pressured England's king to sign this charter. King John did not want to give in to the authority of the Pope, but when Innocent III, the godfather of the Inquisition, who eventually condemned the Magna Carta, threatened him, he gave in and handed his crown to the Pope's ambassador to England. But the English were not having it, and on the 12th of June 1215 he signed the Magna Carta, which English jurist Edward Coke adopted into English common law. The Puritans and Founding Fathers in the colonies of the United States also adopted it into their constitution, which is now coming under question. Section 39 of the Magna Carta reads, "No free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions or outlawed or exiled or deprived of his standing in any other way, nor will we proceed with force against him or send others to do so except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land." But we're now seeing that secular politicians and judges on the back of the war on terror are trying to stealthily incorporate the principles of the Inquisition into the British system. Even EU laws are undermining the authority of the Magna Carta, aligning itself with the threats of Pope Innocent III by sounding almost identical to Roman Catholic canon law. A person accused in a penal case can, even though absent, be brought to trial before the tribunal of the place in which the offence was committed. Accusing a person of a crime before it is committed is also from the Inquisition, which is displayed in the trailer of this post 9/11 film, Minority Report.
Positive for Howard Marks. Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dugan that was to take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours.
Where does the torture method of waterboarding actually come from to extract the information from a suspect? It is from the Papal Inquisition, as well as methods like spying on your neighbors in the United States Patriot Act, which the last United States President George Bush Jr. incorporated into US law. He also incorporated secret prisons and told the spying agency, the NSA, to spy on phone conversations of United States citizens. That was acted out in a film that did the exact same thing in 2008, The Dark Knight. With constant terror laws being passed threatening freedoms, President Obama continues the Inquisition with glorifying the use of torture in Catherine Bigelow's film Zero Dark 30. While many may laugh and mock and think that the Jesuit agenda is outdated, the last Superior General of the Jesuit, Peter Hans Kolbenbach, in 2003 tells us their objective. The efforts of the Jesuits to bring Britain back to the Catholic faith have been praised by the leader of the order. But is not Britain a Protestant nation with a secular culture? What exactly do they mean by that? The Battle of Hastings, Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, and the Magna Carta are among studies will no longer be compulsory in a revised curriculum to be sent to schools. They could learn how Henry VIII was dressed, but nothing about the Reformation. Oxford Don John Wycliffe started the European Reformation in the 14th century to restore a superstitious age back to the true knowledge of God. In the Battle of Hastings in 1066, William conquered Britain for Rome. But during the Reformation, Henry VIII separated Britain from Rome. Britain's unsung hero, William Tyndale, continued from Wycliffe in the 16th century the translation of the Bible, which was completed in the 1611 King James Version, which even English Catholics have benefited from. The Reformation gave us true science, divine philosophy, the media, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, the right of society to govern itself according to justice and equity, educating the masses, public libraries, religious and civil liberty to protect us from ecclesiastical tyranny. And all these freedoms are slowly being eroded and undermined. In the 13th century, Catholic German Bishop Eberhard II called the Pope the Antichrist and Babylon. 3 centuries later, Martin Luther did the same thing. Why do they call the Pope the Antichrist? In the Pope's own words, in the book Crossing the Threshold of Hope, it says, the leader of the Catholic Church is defined by faith as a figure of Jesus Christ and is accepted as such by believers. The Pope is considered the man on earth who represents the Son of God, who takes the place of the second person of the omnipotent God of the Trinity. Have no fear, he says, when people call me the Vicar of Christ, when they say to me, Holy Father, or Your Holiness, or use titles similar to these which seem even inimical or in conflict to the gospel. This has not stopped Protestants like Billy Graham and one of the former heads of the Church of England, Lord Carey, to accept papal supremacy. And bishops like T.D. Jakes who are now dressing like Roman Catholic cardinals and are now part of the movement to merge all the Protestant churches with Rome. Why is this? The late Avram Manhattan tells us why. Ecumenism, which from its very beginning, coupled with Protestantism leftist political bent, resulted in the enfeeblement of the major Protestant bodies. So we see that the Jesuits are working with the Protestants to weaken the Protestant churches, and this was done through the power very recently confirmed by a Jesuit in Vatican II. Vatican II was opened by Pope John the 23rd, and he gave it the instructions to Jesuit Cardinal Augustin Bia. And we're seeing in Vatican II the attire of the bishops is in this papal mitre from ancient Babylon. But what we're now seeing, that Protestant churches are now adopting the attire of the papacy, which shows that the Jesuits' work and agenda of infiltration and conquering Protestant churches has almost come to completion.